Portuguese podcast is called Até Tenho Amigos que São. This is the 9th episode so far and the first one in English. There was a Whit Stillman retrospective at Indie Lisboa, a film festival here in Lisbon, and I got a chance to both talk to him and DJ at a party dedicated to his work, where I played music from his films Metropolitan, Barcelona, Last Days of Disco, Damsels in Distress, and The Cosmopolitans. And that's it.
Do you have To Be Loved?
Yeah, that's the one I got for this party.
It's Motown.
I have some Motown
Temptations.
stuff, Temptations, stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I like it before it went funk. I don't like funk.
Oh, yeah. Let me see. But funk gave way to disco, sort of.
I don't really call that. I don't know. Maybe I'm a little ignorant about terms. I mean, I think that it was the Philadelphia International Sound.
Yeah.
Harold Melvin and Blue Notes, the Gamble and Huff, and I don't think their best music is really funk. It's,
but there's a lot of funky disco music.
Yeah, not my favorite. I like soulful disco a lot. I like soul disco, but not funk disco.
But you sort of noticed that in Last Days of Disco, which I'm already recording. I hope you don't mind. Yeah,
great.
I was watching it last night. I hadn't watched it in a while, but I watched it it's like the 5th or 6th time seeing it. The first time
you saw it at the cinema?
Seeing it on a big screen, and the music is.
How'd it go?
I think
Did it went well? Did people laugh?
Yeah, I think so.
Were you there most of the time?
I was there
The whole screening,
and I laughed a lot, and I don't laugh. I don't know. I can't remember laughing that much watching this particular movie, and still not knowing where the jokes were coming from, and that's I think the best compliment I can give to someone who makes comedies.
Yeah.
Because even though I knew some of the jokes, I couldn't remember them watching the movie, and I was laughing as if it were the first time.
That's cool. I'm not sure if it was someone in the cinema or someone who just happened to be watching the movie like at home or something, but there's a cool thing on Twitter that I saw this morning that someone did last night, which was live tweeting, watching Last Days of Disco, live tweeting, and he had really funny comments.
But in Portuguese or in English?
It was in English, but I don't know if it was an English speaker who was in the cinema last night or just someone who happened to be watching the film at the same time we were watching it.
What did you say about the movie?
I'll send you the link. It was quite funny. It's just little observations. It's a really great thing, the live tweeting things, because he could take like screenshots and put it up and little quotes from dialogue. And
but it's not amazing when you're at the movies and someone is doing that next
bad.
to you.
They shouldn't have it. That shouldn't be done.
They should do it in the back row.
Or
not at all.
I mean, it was really a little shocking going to the Damsels premiere in the Venice Film Festival, and so they put all of us, the actors, and all of us up in the back, and then down there, someone had a big iPad that he was live vlogging or something, and his people next to him were watching, and he was doing all this, and it was like so bright and so distracting, and I couldn't believe the festival didn't clamp down on that.
Because people who do that tend to be people who have the brightness on maximum. They don't even tone it down. They're just no one cares.
It's incredible.
I went to see a movie with a friend of mine, and he had a bright telephone, and he was mad at me for saying shut that down.
Yeah. No. The
people are not
the cinemas have to have firm policies.
Yes.
I think there is. Anyway,
No. Go. Let's.
There was when Damsels was coming out, the American critic Leonard Maltin, a very nice fellow who does those big books.
I know. I have
which are very interesting. He has a cinema class at the University of Southern California, USC, the University of Spoiled Children, and they have this cinema class during the weekend. I think either Friday night or Saturday night. We were invited to that. I think it's the composer Mark Suazo and I. And their screenings, they want to make sure that everyone taking the course because it's open to the whole university. It's not just the film students. It stays for the whole film. So they have to give in their identity cards, their university identity cards at the beginning of the screening, and they can't get their identity cards until the end. And then I sort of was very concerned about like how people who maybe liked one of the earlier films would see the new film that was quite different, how they'd react to it. So at one point, I asked how many people had seen any of our earlier films.
No.
I think it was either no one or one like teacher. I was like, amazing. So we didn't have to worry about disappointing fans.
but it's weird because it was 14 years between Last Days of Disco and Damsels in Distress. Coming out. The movie's coming out.
No, I 13
98.
years.
98 in 2011 or 12?
Well, I mean, it was in Venice in 2011.
Okay,
so it's 13 years. I say sort of 12 years, but it seemed like less than that because I took from 98 to 2000. The novel I wrote came out in 2000. So, I wasn't making a movie then. I was doing a novel, but the novel did come out in 2000. So the real horrible period was from 2000 to 2010 when we started shooting. Like when I knew we were going to be shooting Damsels, that was like really good. So it was a horrible 10 years. And I thought it was over several times. I thought it was over in 2008 when there was a very good British producer who wanted to do my Jamaican film. And we were down doing locations and casting in Jamaica, and then he dropped it and did another film. And that was my experience in London, where just innumerable times I had some producer who was going to do something, and for one reason or another, they went off and did something else. And it was quite disillusioning.
I was going to ask you about the Jamaican project. It's.
No, I think I definitely hope to make it, but I don't think I would make the same film, and it's a little bit too bad that I guess that film that I want to make will die in its earlier incarnation if people want to see that film, because the editor I often work with, that's his favorite script of all the scripts, and I'm not probably going to make that script, but it won't be maybe that hugely different. But it's really hard just to have a script lying around that you don't do anything with, and I have different ideas now, and having done these different films makes me want to do something different.
And you take a lot of time doing the scripts.
It can be. This has been actually a very positive 4 or 5 years, where things are going kind of better and getting stuff written on time and progressing with it. So there's no wood around here yet. So I'm gonna knock on wood. I mean, I hope it can keep on going at like this better pace. So it did take me a lot of time. So it's like a 2.5 year script period and a 1.5 year making the film period. So it's a 4-year cycle.
When you wrote Metropolitan, you were still working in advertising? No.
It wasn't exactly advertising. I had a number of different things I've been doing. I've been, magazines and journalism, but then an uncle of mine had this wonderful agency representing really good cartoonists and artists and illustrators. They were really good. The New Yorker liked my uncle a lot, and when some artists came in that they liked who wanted to do commercial work too, they would often send him down to talk to my uncle, who was a real gentleman and lovely fellow and very funny. And so, for instance, they sent Pierre Letin down to see him, the French Vietnamese artist who lives in Paris, and he's done the posters of at least one version of the poster for all our films, and Sampé, the wonderful French cartoonist. And so my uncle suddenly died in 1984, and so I kept the agency going for a number of years until I could find someone else to take it over full time after Metropolitan. So I was doing that full time and writing Metropolitan nights and weekends.
Yeah, that's what I had read. You had a really late start.
Really late.
For like 36,
really
7, 8?
Yeah, I mean, I've been working on it a long time, so I started writing the Barcelona script in '83. That
was the first one, the Barcelona one?
It's the first script I started of those that I made. and then thought that was too ambitious a film to do as a first low-budget film. So I started writing Metropolitan in '84, just as my uncle was dying, actually. And that took... I found if I really had to sell the artists actively, I couldn't write. And I could only write when everything was going really well and they were getting tons of jobs, so they were busy all the time. And I didn't have to go out actively selling. And it finally, I just couldn't believe when the script was done. I said, this is actually finished. And then that was sort of in '88, and we shot the film. I think we shot this December '88 Christmas footage. And it was first shown in a film market in October '89, and it got into Sundance sort of the back way. We were first, so many festivals, we were first rejected and then accepted later, the year later, in really good terms. So we've been turned down by someone at Toronto in a rough cut version. And then when we came back to Toronto after all these other festivals, it was like a celebrated film already. So it's really kind of a very slow Cinderella story.
And then the Oscar nomination.
It was a Cinderella kind of experience, but there's a lot of rejection and failure before. Good screening at Sundance, good screening at New Directors, Museum of Modern Art in New York, good screening at Cannes Fortnight. That was the key, 3 things. But it took kind of 3 things to launch the film.
And then you were nominated for an Oscar.
That was amazing because there'd been no campaign. I think what it was the distributor did a very good job and kept the film running an incredibly long time in New York. So it had a 7-month run in New York. And the writers branch, which nominates for screenplays, is the only branch where there are a lot of people in New York. And also it was a script that kind of screenwriters responded to.
Yeah.
And I had been inspired by The Big Chill. I had that. I didn't know what the format was for a screenplay, and there had been a format-sized book of The Big Chill that I bought, and I really liked the movie, and it really sort of related to the kind of movie I was doing, and I took the margins and all that from that. So I'm grateful to Larry Kasdan and his publisher.
Did you meet him?
I have met him since, and we've both been sort of in the same stable occasionally, in the sense that I think we both had films coming out with Sony Classics in the same period, and we've both been at film festivals together.
Because I wouldn't watch The Big Chill and then watch Metropolitan and say that was a direct influence.
I'm not looking.
Of course. But I've read interviews where you say that you watch mostly old comedies.
Yeah, I like old. I like pre World War II films.
But then I was hearing you on Elvis Mitchell's show when Damsels came out, and you were talking about how you liked School Days by Spike Lee.
Yeah, I did.
You have.
And I think it's quite related to Damsels in Distress. I think it'd be a good double feature.
Yeah, I think so. And you also said that you like Will Ferrell comedies.
I love Will Ferrell, yeah.
That's stuff that people don't necessarily. The 30s and 40s movies, pre-war comedies, is something that you watch your movies and you see that you can see the influence. Those other things, not so much.
I mean, I think people might have noticed it in Damsels.
Yeah.
There was the stupid fat comedy. So, I mean, I like the innocent character Will Ferrell does. I like stupid innocence on screen. I think Americans do that pretty okay. It's sort of our thing, stupid innocence, and the comedy of it. And so I really like Blades of Glory. I discovered Will Ferrell in Paris taking my daughters to see Elf, which I knew nothing about. So I entered the Will Ferrell world through his most innocent, sweetest film, from a fellow who actually, the screenwriter who developed that, turns out to be in my same church in New York. Yeah. So we're sort of coming from the same place.
Who wrote Elf? Was it Thomas McCarthy? No.
His name is very difficult. No, it's not McCarthy. It's It's like Jesse Castus. It starts with a K, and it's a very difficult name to remember. Todd Kavinci or something like that. And
What did I think that was Tom McCarthy? I don't know.
no, he did.
Station Agent. And
Yeah, he did Station Agent.
around the same time.
I mean, it's kind of an odd thing.
It's
It's kind of an odd thing that I was over in Paris for various reasons, really because I couldn't afford Manhattan, and good education is much less expensive for your children in Paris. And Todd McCarthy came over. I tried to cast Todd in Last Days of Disco. He was supposed to play the part that Robert Sean Leonard ultimately played, but he couldn't get out of the play he was in with Joanne Woodward. And so we were left in the middle of the shoot with no Tom character. And so I'd met Robert Sean Leonard, and we contacted him, and he sort of did us this favor because it's kind of a big name.
Yeah, he had already did the Poet Society.
But we'd really hit it off when we had met, and Robert Sean Leonard came in, and I think almost of all the actors I've worked with, he has this sort of set mannerisms and the attitude towards work that I most admire, because he's so dedicated, and Robert Sean Leonard would come to set, dressed in his outfit and just sit there reading a book calmly, and it was so encouraging for all the extras, who a lot of them were friends in New York who knew the theater scene, knew him from theater. To have this kind of big name just sitting among everyone else, reading a good book, ready to work, not hiding in a trailer, depressed, taking drugs or whatever that people do in trailers.
As many of the people who were in your movies, he then turned to TV, and he got huge on TV during House.
That's great.
Yeah,
so great.
And Chris Eigerman had a sitcom. Carlos Jacot shows up regularly and stuff.
Yeah.
And Taylor Nichols and Matt Kiesler and whoever.
Yeah.
And you did that Homicide: Life on the Street episode, and then you didn't do TV. Anymore.
I was offered some stuff, but by then things had changed, and it was to do shows. They're actually HBO shows that were really, really, really dirty, and they wanted you to accept the shows without reading the scripts and take 2 scripts. And the thing is, some of the shows were okay, but some of them were just so gross out. I felt I couldn't say yes just based on nothing, But it's a real problem for people working now, because most of the material is so gross that a lot of people have a hard time, you wanting to do it.
But back then, it's the episode is like 96 or something like that.
That was good. That was a very good period. I mean, Homicide, that kind of show, I would have liked to have done more of those.
But when film directors wanted to get onto TV, they would direct, and now maybe there's that more of the notion that the author is the writer.
Yeah.
And I think maybe as you did with the Cosmopolitans, that you'd create your own show if you wanted to get into television, or if television wanted you to do something. That works.
Yeah, I mean, it's always been. It's been a writer's medium, television, and so there are these people very prolific in television. The fellow who did Homicide was Tom Fontana, and I think he had also been involved with St. Elsewhere, which is a good show beforehand. And I think he then did other shows.
He did Oz on HBO.
And then David Simon, I think a lot of people liked The Wire. I think David Simon did that.
Yeah.
And
he wrote the book that was turned into Homicide: Life on the Street.
That's
how he got his break on
started.
TV.
That was a really good. That was a very good way of proceeding. I think it really helped the show Homicide to have that kind of background and heft. And I think that when I directed the episode, I had gotten a copy of the book. So I read that to know more about what was happening. And the actors on that show were really great, really good crew. So I would have loved to have done more TV, but I was mostly back in Paris. And then the stuff that I'd be offered was that stuff was hard to just say yes to. And it's very good, situation right now. The opportunity in TV is very good. But anyway, the thing I was talking about Tom McCarthy before was I met him in Paris when he came over later, and then he was saying that Wes Anderson was in Paris. So I'd never met Wes Anderson in Paris, but it was kind of an odd thing. At a certain point, we were all kind of there writing scripts, and I think there were other people there too. I came down from where I was living early one morning, and I saw Holly from Last Days of Disco, looking in one of the shop windows, and she was involved in fashion. I think she was a friend of Wes Anderson's, and so it was Mecca for indies back then.
And Wes Anderson has said that Metropolitan influenced him directly.
He said that?
I think he said that when he saw Metropolitan with something like, oh, this is what me and my friends want to do on the big screen.
Oh, great. That's cool.
I read a quote by him that you hadn't read that?
I think I had. Because I felt that when I needed a comparison for what I wanted to do with damsels, I used Rushmore. I said, well, I want to make a female Rushmore.
And set in a college instead of a school.
Yeah.
And also Baumbach has that kicking and screaming. It's very influenced by you.
Yeah.
To the point of having Chris Hagen.
It took a long time before there were sort of a group of. It seemed to me it took a long time before there were like-minded people. I mean, I greatly admired. For me, the sort of eureka moment. There are 3 eureka moments. So one was when John Sayles did Return of the Secaucus 7. Because that means, okay, you can be a short story writer and you go out and do your own film, that stuff you know about. And then Jim Jarmusch did Stranger Than Paradise. And I was in the film sales business then. I think I was at Cannes when it was shown in Director's Fortnight. And I was trying to sell, the Spanish films. There were also good indie comedies like Fernando Treva's Opera Prima. And it was so, I think a film with the most incredibly efficient use of economy of means, I think Stranger Than Paradise would have to be the best example. I mean, the economy of means are just exceptional, and the effect is wonderful. And then Spike Lee's She's Gotta Have It was really inspirational too. And in fact, to get the budget of Metropolitan, there's a New Yorker article by, I think, Pauline Kael on how Spike put together the financing for She's Gotta Have It. And I went through it, adding up the numbers. You need this much money for this much for that. But it was also the Spanish directors I was working with who... You
were an actor in some of the movies?
I got to be, because just 2 of them, they needed a stupid American in their film, and I became the stupid American. But that was eye-opening to be in other people's films and see how they did it. But Alberto Bermejo, who's now the critic for El Mundo, he made this little film called Vecinos that I really liked, Neighbors. And I asked him how much money he had to make, and he said, we had this credit from this and this credit from that. And he said, but the actual cash we had was $50,000. And so that clicked, and I wrote the Metropolitan script to do it with $50,000.
You did it with $250?
So I had $50,000 to start with for the shoot, and that was our plan. We were $50,000 to shoot it, and then it turned out to be more expensive than that. We wanted to make it look better than original, so I borrowed $35,000, and then my best friend and I put in another $5,000 each, and so it was like $95,000 for the shoot. And then we really liked what we had, and this associate producer had $40,000 as a nest egg to start raising money for his own film. And he put his $40,000 in. So we started we were able to keep editing, and I think we never had more. I think we only had about $190,000 in the film, but we owed the lab like $40,000, but we sold it to a TV series called American Playhouse to be shown there after cinema release, after VHS release. And so they allowed us to take the deposit and use that to pay the lab. So that, and then there's later then deferments to the actors when we started making money. But it's very profitable for the investors. And so I'm glad I got suckered into investing myself.
But, and then you did, and then you got the budget for Barcelona through that?
Castle Rock.
Through Castle Rock,
yeah. Castle Rock approached me.
That's the Rob Reiner company?
Rob Reiner company. It seemed really interesting when I was watching Spinal Tap. I had no idea they'd be my benefactors for 3 films. But it's thanks to Rob Reiner and his partners, particularly Martin Schaefer, that I got to make 3 films. Because they did Damsels privately themselves. That's unusual.
But you were talking about Spinal Tap. Are you a Spinal Tap fan?
Yeah, of course. But you know, Spinal Tap is interesting because I read
You kind of look like Christopher Guest.
Yeah, I know. I know. I hate how he looks. I know. It's like when you hear your own voice on a recording, you think, who's that jerk? It's so funny. It's the thing that all the Cast Rock people said, you look like Chris Guest. Because they did his comedies too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love his films. That's so funny.
They have some actors in common. I don't know who.
What?
There are some actors in common between.
I would have loved to have used Parker Posey.
Yeah.
I love Parker Posey.
You're one of the few indie filmmakers in New York in the 90s that didn't use her.
I know. I wonder why she didn't. The only time there was a part she was right for was the Kate Beckinsale part in Last Days of Disco.
Yeah.
So we were.
She would have aced it.
Yeah, Kate. I had thought of Kate a long time for it, and then I said, well, Parker would be good too, so we should, try to consider both. And it was odd because I think she was in England for some reason, but Kate read for Last Days of Disco, and we couldn't get Parker to read for it. And I think it was because she had accepted She's Got Mail. No, You've Got Mail.
You've Got Mail. Nora Ephron.
I think she accepted that, and those big studio films have really huge dates, so they block you out. I think it could also have been an agency thing. Like I find the two biggest agencies are very hard. It's sometimes very hard to get actors to work on smaller films. It's kind of a bad situation. So CAA I find very hard to deal with.
Maybe it's easier now, no?
I don't know. Not in my experience.
Okay. You were talking about how you like Spinal Tap and Will Ferrell, and I noticed last night, I never remember this when I watched the movie, Rex is played by Mark McKinney from Kids in the Hall. Are you a Kids in the Hall fan?
I don't really know Kids in the Hall.
Oh, okay.
But everyone told me it was great. I really liked him.
He was on SNL back then, wasn't he?
I really liked to see more of Mark's work. I really liked him. It's one of those things where I just really liked him in the casting process, and he was, interested in being in the film, which was great. And I just liked him, but everyone said, "Oh, he's really terrific. He's really great."
But you never got around to watching it?
I mean, the thing is, it's kind of a crazy thing I did. The weekend that Last Days Disco opened in the States, I lost my apartment in New York, and so I had a sort of summer of wandering, but we had made the decision to move to Paris. And I moved to Paris August 17th of 98, and I left New York, that weekend. And so I could never follow up on all these things. And I think it really hurt me as far as making more films. I think it's really important to sort of stay in touch with people and be friendly with people. And it's thanks to the Criterion commentary track for Last Days Disco that I got back in touch with Chloe. And I really like Chloe, and so she accepted a spot in Cosmopolitan. So it was really started out as a cameo, and we made it bigger during the shoot. And then I had to start talking to her about this Jane Austen film, Love and Friendship.
Kate's also involved.
Yeah, and Kate was with she went to my agency, UTA, and she was with a really great agent, Shani Rosenberg. And Shani was just terrific and really read scripts and liked the script a lot, and we saw how great it was, how great Kate would be for the role, and really pressed for it. And I was just so sad that Kate had left this wonderful agent to go back to CAA, which when I was at CAA, it was the period when I didn't do any work at all. I found it really unhealthy.
When I talked about the more than 10 years that you were away from filmmaking, the Damsels in Distress is a different movie from the other three. It's not part of the trilogy, and it's less. I wouldn't say that the others are realistic per se, but it's less.
It's stylized.
It's more stylized and more of a fantasy.
Yeah. So. I guess the thing that started out being more of a fantasy, and it caused me problems because I think I lost my original backing I know I did. I decided I wanted to have angels in the Jamaican story. I wanted to have a funny angel. And so I started having angel characters and demon characters, and that's not very realistic in some people's minds. If you're not very devout, it's not realistic. And so I lost the backing I originally had in England because they wanted realism and grittiness and, you know.
There was also
And so I had this idea of sort of comic fantasy. And so I'd already sort of gone into comic fantasy before I'd gone into, but actually, you know, I find it, you get a lot of different, I mean, you get a few commissions, so sometimes you get these commissions where they're not really serious about it. They sort of want you to write something, but you're not really, like in TV in the old days, there's all this money asking you to do something, and you've got 6 weeks to do it, and you must do it now, or there's a writer's strike, and you must send it in now, even though it's not ready, because if you don't send it in now, we won't get paid. And like, some of these commissions, I don't know if anyone ever read the scripts I did, but it's kind of good to sort of, well, I could survive, I could live. And also you sort of try out ideas. So I sort of started trying out the damsels in distress idea a long time ago, and it sort of was always that fantastic element. And then the Jamaican idea went sort of fantastic. And this Jane Austen adaptation also has its comic fantastic side also. So I think in my mind, Damsels in Distress, Love and Friendship, and the Jamaican story are sort of a trilogy of sort of stylized comedies. Cosmopolitans is back more like the first three films.
The Jamaican story, I also heard you on Elvis Mitchell saying that the backing was hard because it's a mostly black cast and that's international.
I found that really really discouraging, and it's not an American problem, frankly. In the United States, it wasn't an issue. But for international sales and stuff like that, it's very hard.
Films with mostly black cast don't even get on in theaters here, come out in theaters.
School Days
here.
never came out in Europe.
Your movies also haven't come out here. That's the first time they're shown. But I'm talking about real mainstream movies and big studio movies.
Also comedies.
Comedies. It's
like
never.
Anchorman 2.
Yeah, never came out here.
Never came out, and it went straight to video in France.
And here too.
Yeah, and even now, Castrock did I think what looks like a really simpatico movie with Hugh Grant. And Mark, is it Mark Lawrence, director?
That's the rewrite.
Yeah.
It came out here this year.
Have you
it's
seen
like,
it? It's okay, right?
It's okay. The last movie they did together was one of the worst romantic comedies I've ever seen in my entire life.
I didn't mind it.
The Morgans.
I hated
the Morgans.
I enjoyed it.
But you could tell that they weren't.
They weren't on their game.
They weren't on their game. And they are on their game in the rewrite.
Oh, that's good. But it's so discouraging. That was I think it might have a token theatrical release.
Yeah.
But it got a theatrical release here?
Yeah. It's like it was sort of dumped in theaters. It's a weird time for movies in Portugal.
It's a weird time for movies everywhere. It's very discouraging.
Comedies do seem to get a bad rap. And
some should study the comedies that do work. I think Tootsie was an international hit.
Yeah.
Tootsie worked.
Dustin Hoffman.
It's interesting too. I think people like. I think they like trans stories because Tootsie worked and La Cage aux Folles really worked well.
But it's more like cross-dressing, not trans.
Yeah, cross-dressing, whatever.
Yeah, and Mrs. Doubtfire also worked with
Mrs. Doubtfire. It's really funny, isn't it? It does work.
Yeah, it's
really very visual. It's a very visual, easy to understand comic idea.
I don't know, but maybe I've read you saying that comedies don't get a lot of respect, and that's maybe why.
But sometimes they ask to be kicked. I mean, you see the advertising campaigns for some comedies, and it's like they're saying "kick me."
Yeah.
I mean, because I see these.
And it's even worse here because it's if you think that the ad campaigns dumb down comedies in America, they dumb it down to the maximum here. But it's really almost insulting level. They're almost always made by people who not only haven't seen the film, but don't know anything about the film and take like the least representative part of it and dumb it down to the maximum, and it's ridiculous. Okay, but continue. Sorry.
No, what you're saying is absolutely right. And in fact, there's a story of the big deal publicist at one of the French, the French branch, one of the studios. There's developed now critics in Europe very good critics, who love the comedies and appreciate them. And there's a kind of very important filmmaker for the studio who had his film coming out in France, and the head publicist comes up to the critic, like after the screening or before the screening, and apologizes for the film, sort of saying the film's terrible or something like that. And the critic said, "No, I love it. I love the film. I think it's beautiful." And the publicist was such a snob, you know, and they have this terrible attitude toward their own film. They have no idea. And but I think this thing with this sort of new generation of critics, you know, we're starting to appreciate them. Over 5 or 10 years, that could change things.
Yeah,
but one of the things interesting about French filmmaking is that they've kept the tradition of the good middle brow comedy, like a good, I think his name is Francis Weber. You know, they're really well written, funny stories and human situations. And like the only way really in the United States you can get that kind of film is by taking a French film that's done well, and you take it over and remake it in the United States. And those turn out to be good films. And but the thing is now, the ad campaigns for those films, when I see them in France, I kind of don't want to see the film because they just make it seem like so nakedly easy and crowd-pleasing and obvious. It's like that British thing of the Marigold Hotel, kind of heartwarming, very easy, populist comedies, sort of part sentimental, part... I don't know, maybe some of them are really good. It's just the whole idea that it's kind of formula, it's kind of industry fabrication. It's not like a person doing something they're sincere about.
But what kind of comedies do you like more than comedies?
Well, I find Oscar season really tough because everyone wants to talk about the 5 films being pushed by the distributors, when if you've been going to small screenings and small festivals, you see all these good little films that are so nice. And so I like some of the tiny budget American comedies.
Which ones?
I can't remember, it's called Red Flag or something. The fellow who is in Girls does his own films.
Alex.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Karpovsky.
Yeah, he's smart. I like his films. And I like the
he does
Duplessis. The Duplessis. I think there are a lot of them, and Joe Swanberg is good.
Yeah.
There are a lot of good people.
Weren't the Duplessis the ones who put Greta Gerwig in her first movie? I don't think, or one of his,
Duplessis
her first.
And Joe Swanberg, she did a lot with them.
Yeah.
And then but in my generation, or not my generation, but closer to it, like I like Tom DiCillo.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of directors in that period I really like.
That one, I was thinking that the Plus Brothers movie with her, which one was it? The one, Baghead.
Yeah.
So it's like a horror movie. It's a twisted horror movie. Well, what kind of other films do you like that are not comedies? Or TV shows, maybe?
Well, you're pushing me because I really try to sort of isolate myself when I'm writing, and I try to be sort of informed by other things and not just be looking at films and TV shows. And so I look at a lot of documentaries, and I read a lot of history and biography and fiction from old. I really like. I find I learn more from the past than from the present somehow. I sort of know about the present because I'm living in it, and I don't know about the past. So I read a lot of stuff set in the past. It really helped me with the Jane Austen film that I'd been in a reading jag about sort of Anglo-American politics of the late 18th century, beginning of the 19th century. And so when I had to add material to the Jane Austen story, I knew a lot of stuff from that period that I could use, and that helped me. And I have, ideas for films set in that period. I mean, because I wanted to make a low-budget film, and I knew about, low budget comedy and all that, and experiences, that's where my career was. But I really so much wanted to do, historical adventure kind of films and other kind of things. But you have to accept the reality of the business and of what people want you to do and what you can do. And so part of the reason I had those 10 unproductive years is because I was writing scripts in genres that I wasn't used to. So I wrote a historical adventure film for Castle Rock that just is completely beyond the kind of thing they do. They sort of commissioned it as a favor to me. And I still hope to do that. And a lot of the actors from Cosmopolitans would be really great in it because it's sort of comic. They used to make, when the James Bond series started out, they managed to combine a sort of elegance and action and adventure and comedy and fantasy. It was all sort of there, and the James Bond series has lost that. I think they tried to do this thing, Kingsman.
Yeah.
Did they try to get back to that a little bit?
Yeah, but it's tongue-in-cheek and very. It's almost a satire of some of the conventions of.
I would like to do something like that, but more seriously. Do some serious stuff. And a lot of serious stuff is happening in the world. I mean, so I was going to set my story back in 1989, the liberation of Eastern Europe, and then have a pre-story when all of that, when everything went bad, which was in 37, 38, 39, and in 47, 48. So it's going to be sort of these two generations story. And then time goes on, 1989 is now very far away. But now we have the thing with Ukraine and with Crimea and Putin and all these things. And so there's still that kind of, serious thing that we portrayed.
You're talking about the elegance of those James Bond movies. Elegance is something that that is a value that you try to have in your movies. Something that you try to have in your movies. And people are always sharply dressed and neatly dressed. Where does that come from? Does that come from a love of formality and social mannerisms and mores and conventions?
It's a lot of things together, and one thing is it looks good.
Yeah,
it really looks good on screen. I mean, the thing I sort of liked about Reservoir Dogs was he found a way to have everyone wearing black suits, white shirts, and ties, and look really cool.
And they also used in Pulp Fiction the Sam Jackson and John Travolta. They also used black.
Yeah, but I mean, in Reservoir Dogs was a classic way of getting everyone really well dressed.
Yeah.
And so I sort of love the look. I think it's a great look, and all the other things you said too. Yeah.
Because that's also...
It ties us to the past, and I hope that it's going to come back in some good way, these things, because it's really cool to see the costumes in our Jane Austen film, because it's really beautiful outfits. The way guys dressed in 1795 was pretty darn terrific, and it'd be great if something came back.
Is that movie set in 1795, and does it say 1795 specifically? No. You'll never go that route.
I try to avoid that because you get this kind of claustrophobic waxworks of exact period, and so we do kind of a soft period in the films, and so Metropolitan's supposed to be set quite far back in the past, but I couldn't afford to do a period film, so we just tried to make things that were around in earlier periods and try not to show things that were terribly up to date. And the cars left in the streets of New York all night long in the winter tend to be older model cars. We tried to hunt down the last remaining boxy checker taxi cabs, to have period taxi cabs. And so it's soft period. And then Last Days of Disco, I hated the way fashions were in the 70s, so set the film in the early 80s, both for that reason, things look better, and also we could use all of the music up to La Dolce Vita from 1982. And
you really play around with time, because halfway through the disco sex movement, which is in 79, that burning of records,
I thought that kind of thing was going on all the time. So it doesn't matter if the Pacific thing was 79, our film's 81, whatever. And then also, I went through all the fashion magazines in the period to find things that looked good to my eyes in 1996, 97. It still looked good to me, but it was in a fashion magazine in that period. And so the costume designer used things that looked good to us but had been around then. And so it doesn't look period to a lot of people, but it's authentic in that way. And then for the vehicles and things like that, we had our period cars in the foreground, but in the distance it's just New York City going on and you don't really notice it, or we put in old trucks blocking other things. And I think that's good because that way you get the idea of the life of the city, things are moving around, it's not just one little street boxed off.
But it gives you that lack of specificity of years. It gives your movies a sort of timeless quality.
I hope so, because when you're in a period, you're not thinking, oh, I'm in this period and everything's a period, and you're not thinking about it. And so I kind of don't want people to think about it when they're watching the movies. Sometimes I find, movies with big budgets and ambitious production designers, they go so far to making a period that you almost can only look at all the period stuff.
And there's also a thing that ties into that I was thinking about the specifically about tonight with the songs that I'll be playing, and the songs that I was hearing in the movie is that when people were doing disco songs, the idea that I have is that these people were trying to do music of the moment, that they were never concerned about how it would sound 10 years from then, 20 years from then, and they sort of still hold up now. It's really weird. And then when you did the Last Days of Disco movie, the perception of disco in the public eye was still something cheesy, kitsch, and then I don't know, in the next decade it came back, and people now look at it through a different light.
Yeah. We have the advantage of, the film has both the music I really remembered loving at the time. I remember being in Studio 54 when certain songs played and how great the reaction was. And then music that I got to know and love in the years afterwards. So I'd heard and liked some of the Gamble and Huff songs from the early 70s. But I hadn't really gotten deeply into it. Radio stations had changed their format, and in the 60s they've been playing a lot of soul music, a lot of Motown. And as sort of 69, they changed their formats. We didn't hear Philadelphia, and the sort of pop oldie stations. We didn't hear the Philadelphia international sound. And so I caught up with it later, and then and then I was in Europe quite a bit, so I heard Euro disco and liked it. And so, I liked the good ones. And so I tried to get the best of all those in the soundtrack.
Is it something that you still listen to now?
What?
Do you still listen to it?
Well, I try to save it now because I don't want to get totally sick of it. I was just reading something where someone says the first piece of score in Last Days of Disco doesn't come until 40 minutes in. But actually, Mark Suazo, the composer, he scored a bridge for the Carol Douglas song Doctor's Orders. So when we keep them waiting outside the disco and they have going back, that's a bridge. We had licensed the music, and our composer wrote continuation so that we could start Doctor's Orders, then have this bridge covering several scenes, and then come back, boom, into the song when they get into the club.
There was no extended version of it?
I think there have been extended versions of everything, but what we needed to use a particularly scored version of the theme. I'd like to do that more, of taking a theme that exists and then put it into the score. It's what John Ford did in a lot of his movies.
Is Mark Suazo working in the Jane Austen movie?
What?
Is Mark working in the Jane Austen movie?
Yeah.
You only work with him, but
No, I work with other people too. But I always try to work with him. He's on every project.
He worked with Adam Schlesinger doing the Symbol.
And Tom Judson.
Yeah.
They didn't really work together. They both worked on it. And it'll probably be that way in this one.
Adam Schlesinger is a guy I remember from that Tom Hanks movie in 1996. He did it's called That Thing You Do. He did the song.
Did he really do that? That song? I really liked it.
I think so.
I was really impressed.
Isn't he the Fountains of Wayne guy?
Yeah.
So,
I was really impressed with his credits.
Yeah.
I like That Thing You Do, and I like that movie.
That song is ultra catchy. I watched it twice because I used to rent movies and I watched them at night and then again in the morning, and I had that song stuck in my head for 10 years without ever listening to it again.
But I have it. I mean, I have it in my playlist, and I think he did a soul song there too, that was also really good. That was really good. That was a very impressive credit. Then he had a very impressive credit on the Cast Rock film. I think it's called Words and Lyrics.
Music
and Lyrics.
That's also Mark with Hugh Grant.
Hugh Grant and Barrymore.
Mark Lawrence. Is it Mark Lawrence? Mark.
I think it's Mark Lawrence.
So maybe we're wrong. I think it's Mark Lawrence. Another. I don't know. Mark something. There's great pop 60s, what's it, pop 80s music at the end of that. But it turns out I talked to Adam later, and he said, oh no, I didn't do that, this other guy did that. Okay. But there's
he did great stuff for us, but ultimately I'm really used to working with Mark for all the scoring, for the emotional stuff, for really closely. Adam did a brilliant job with these tracks that we got a lot of mileage out of.
We're talking about disco, and do you still dance?
Yeah, I whenever I can.
Will you dance tonight?
Yes, definitely. Marianne likes dancing too. Definitely.
What attracts you to dancing and to putting dancing on screen?
I wish I had leather soles. So maybe I should buy some shoes because it's terrible trying to dance with rubber soles. Maybe get some socks and sock up. What attracts you to it?
Yeah. It's fun, yeah, of course.
I mean, I think the other question is why aren't people dancing? Why aren't more people dancing more often? And one of my favorite films, which the French snob, is Under the Roofs of Paris, René Clair, Sous les Toits de Paris. It's from like 1931, and the amount of dancing in it is just so amazing, and it's reflecting the period. I mean, Billy Wilder supported himself as a paid dancer in Berlin cafes. Yeah, 10 cents a dance. Yeah, and I mean, dancing was just all the time.
And what attracts you to putting it on screen? That was the real question.
It's very cinematic. It's very cinematic, and you can advance your story without dialogue. So we're not just doing dialogue for dialogue. The story's advancing through dialogue, and there's the comedy through dialogue. But there's also, it's so cinematic, music and dancing and film. And story can advance through dancing.
I was noticing last night it's like a musical chairs number because people are pairing off while dancing.
Yeah, things are happening. One thing I found was that I generally cannot use professional dancing in my movies. Professional dancers have an act that sticks out. Yeah. And I just need to get people to do the kind of dancing we do.
I really like Robert Sean Leonard's dancing in that movie.
It's really good.
It's really amazing.
Good. I think Matt Kieslar and Chris Eigenmann are very anti-dance. They're very anti-dance. Chris Eigenmann, I thought he danced really charmingly in Barcelona, but when he accepted the part in disco, it was with the requirement that he not dance.
But that goes well with his character.
Yeah, Des doesn't dance.
What are your favorite? You were talking about that Under the Stars movie.
Sous les Toits de Paris, Under the Roofs of Paris.
Under the Roofs of Paris. What are your other favorite dances in movies?
Well, my favorite movie of that kind is The Quai d'Orsay, the Mark Sandridge directed film with Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, and a wonderful cast of character actors. So The Gay Divorcee is one I really adore. I also love Top Hat, which is sort of the big budget, smoother version of Gay Divorcee. I love Mark Sandridge. And I mean, I'd have to really go back and think about, more things, but I mean, it's sort of strange, the films one loves. I love Hitchcock films, and I love John Ford films. And I like, of course, Howard Hawks films, although I find that I'm critical of some of them. I mean, I don't feel the same solidity of constancy with Hawks that I do with the other people. He let some stuff get in that were kind of strange. But
for example,
Ford used dancing very well. Dancing in Ford is always very good.
And did you try the Sambola dance yourself before bringing?
I'm the choreographer. I came up with it.
Oh, you came up with it.
I came up with it. I can't necessarily do it, but I did come up with it with the composer. He started rehearsing the actors in sort of a neo Macarena kind of thing, and so I went to Justin and said, I really like people dancing together, not in line. I mean, not. And I really want them dancing together as couples. And what I think we should consider doing is the best part of each dance. So we'll do the best part of the tango, we'll do the best part of the cha-cha, we'll do the best part of this and that, and the foxtrot. And let's put them together, let's take those moves. And then I had the song. I did have Tombe la Chemise, the French pop song that I love. And unfortunately, it's a really bad reputation in France for no good reason, because they play it in weddings all the time and stuff like that. But it's a really great dance song. Do you know Tombe la Chemise?
No.
I think if you heard it, you know it.
Maybe. Francisco,
Do you have the music from Cosmopolitans?
I have some songs. Do you have it on the USB?
Yeah.
I can take it home and I'll try to burn it.
Okay.
I think.
And then.
I think I only have a couple.
And then. So using that music, he crafted the dance, and so I can't really do it myself. But he said I could have co-choreographer credit.
But I've heard you talk about how you really want the Sambola to turn into.
Yeah,
you really wanted it to turn into an international dance craze.
Yes.
But you can't do it yourself. That's weird.
Yes, you're right. I'm very lazy. I haven't been, at many Sambola dance parties since then.
Maybe.
I think I could do it. I just wouldn't want anyone to watch.
Maybe. There are at least 2 videos, which is one with Greta Gerwig and Adam Brody on YouTube or Vimeo that teach you how to learn. If there was one that with you teaching people, maybe it would catch on.
Okay, I'll try that.
Okay. I think maybe we're done.
Very good.
Okay. Thank you.